What's up, everybody? It's Mike here with Slam Academy. Today we're talking about analog. It's your grandpa's synth, but it is a sleeper hit if you know what you're doing. Problem is, a lot of people take a look at analog and they get a little bit intimidated by all the knobs and buttons here. So we're going to just kind of decode some of the stuff and just talk about some of the cooler things that you might want to take a look at when you're using this. And I genuinely recommend learning analog because as far as synths go, it is classically the way that stuff at least used to be routing as far as just signal flow. So if you understand analog, odds are you're going to understand a lot just about synthesis in general, which is why in our sound design program at Slam, low-key plug, we always start with analog just as a teaching tool so people understand sound design. And if you want to check us out, go ahead and hit up slamacademy.com to check out our programs. Also, real quick, please hit that like and subscribe and share button. Drop us a comment. It really does help out the algorithm. And I just want to keep making these tutorials for everyone. So the more we get to do that, the better for everybody. Woo! Okay, let's go. We got an analog here. Check it out. We've got kind of two rows, two oscillators, two filters, two amplifiers, two LFOs, and then a nice little global tab. And with a lot of stuff in Ableton, you see that kind of the middle window changes depending on what I click on. So the first thing to understand is where is all of this getting routed? If you look down here, you see oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 on, but only filter 1 and amplifier 1. I'm going to mess this up. I'm going to mess that up all day. If we look down here in oscillator 2, we can see filter F1 or F2. So oscillator 1 and 2 are both being routed through filter 1, which goes to amplifier 1. And actually, filter 1 wants to go to filter 2, but these two are turned off, so we're actually kind of cutting off the flow. If you look in the global tab, so click back here, you actually see a quick routing little setup. This is reminiscent of operator a little bit. So if I click on this, this is fully parallel. Now look, oscillator 1 just goes out the top row, oscillator 2 just goes out the bottom row. This is kind of our default. Where two oscillators go through one filter and one amplifier. And you can look, this one's a little mixed bag. These two are little mixed bags. So we're gonna start in the default mode, and then we'll maybe turn on filter 2. And have a good time. So one thing I like to point out almost immediately, and this is a bit of a heady noise design technique, is to check out sync mode. And down here in our pitch envelope section, so we have basically envelopes for all three of these sections: the oscillator, the filter, and the amplifier. In our pitch envelope, which is a little bit limited in its scope, I'll give you that for sure. Let's take off oscillator 2, and we'll just listen to oscillator 1 with this pitch envelope. When I have a little, kind of a very low pitched saw wave, let's speed the time or slow the time down a little bit. And here, kind of ramping up. But if I go over here to sub, if you have a sub on, I just have my headphones. You'll hear a little sub layer under here, but sync mode is really where things get a little crunchy. So I'm going to move this sync around and we'll listen to this. If you're familiar with like Wavetable or Serum, I know Serum 2 is the hot business right now. This might sound a little familiar, right? So this was in analog the whole time and no one even knew it. So what I really like to do is just grab a little LFO here. And what I'm kind of aiming to do is have one of these oscillators be a little wacky and the other one will be a little bit standard. And that's good practice for any type of synthesis. It doesn't matter if you're using Wavetable, Serum, Phase Plant, whatever. Having one oscillator be strong and like just a triangle, saw, square, something like that is usually a good idea because it's going to carry a little bit more energy. If both of your oscillators are wild, then your noise is going to lose, especially the sub region, but also just like you're going to lose control of that really quickly. So I'm going to grab an LFO here on oscillator 1 in the sync section of the sub sync. That's in the pitch. And now this is moving way too fast. So let's slow that guy down. So that's pretty nice. That's pretty cool. That's a fun thing to kind of switch up a little bit early on. I'm going to leave this ramp just for funsies because, we're just doing some fun noises today. And let's come over to our first filter. Now, here's another thing I really like to point out. We actually have the ability to do formant filters in here. I would like the first filter we hit. I think what I want to do is I want to route two oscillators through filter 1. And this first filter should probably be pretty standard. So we're going to leave this in low pass. We have an envelope on here. I could just take this envelope off here in the filter section. So if I want to route envelopes, LFOs, all that stuff to the filter, I click on the filter section. We can see here's my envelope for the frequency modifier modulation area. Let's turn that to 0. And I'm going to turn LFO 1 on, and we're going to set this to sync mode. We'll do quarter notes is fine. Let's see, we're at 80 BPM. That's fine. That's a little slow. You know what? Whatever. If we need to speed it up, we can. You know what? Let's put it in free mode. Now you can kind of hear that like sync come up with the wub, which is really cool. You know what? And I lied. I'm going to turn a little bit of the envelope on, just not all the way. This goes all the way up to 6. That's a lot. 16 is a very large target. Maybe we'll have it be at 1 or something like that. Now, the thing is that I want this to eventually go to some formant as well. So see here, to filter 2, we're going to turn this up to 100%. It doesn't have to be 100, but now it's going to send some signal down here, and I want this to be in formant. We'll say 12 dB per octave slope. And now we need to engage amplifier 2. And formant is really cool. Let's turn amp 1 off so we can just hear what's going on. If I move the resonance is what really changes this. In fact, if I were smart and a good teacher, I would maybe grab a spectrum so we can kind of see what's going on here. Let's take a look here. Look at that. That's beautiful. Let me move the resonance around. So resonance is not acting like we're used to in this scenario. It's not just pushing one area up. It spreads the formants around. And so this is a great time to maybe pop on LFO 2. And here's another thing I really like to point out is the LFOs in here have 2. They have noise 1, which is your classic like blocky random sample and hold, or we have noise 2, and this is actually an early version of basically just randomness built into analog. People are sleeping on analog, and like, guys, it has all the tools that you're used to using. It was actually first for a lot of them. So we're gonna pop on LFO 2 to the frequency over here. We'll pop it over here to the resonance, because again, that resonance is what's changing a lot of stuff. And we can make these go negative if we want to as well. Let's have them go in opposite directions. It's not necessarily going to sound exactly like that. And then also we have key tracking here, which I think is usually a good idea. So I can kind of track my keys. The filter will move around at a 1-to-1 ratio. And if you're going to do that, I think you want to set your, forgive me if I got this wrong, I think it's 263, which is middle C. Let's take a look here. 260 something. I'm close. I'm in the ballpark. It's fine. I think that's what it is. And now that's just the formant. Let's turn on the other guy. So we have still a little bit of that like fundamental low end frequency. Here's our bass note, right? And if I feel like that's a little too crunchy, I can kind of reset the disparity between these two. Maybe the formant filter will pull down to like -24. A little bit. It's still kind of a peak. We can address that with a little bit of a EQ. Now, another thing I really like to do in here is detune a little bit in either direction. And not even, that's even a lot. Like I'm saying like 0.01, 0.02. When you unlock those waveforms, if they're at just perfect tuning, even if they're like off by an octave or some semitones, they're still like pretty full ratios, right? So it could be like a ratio of like 4 to 5. So the endpoints are going to meet up fairly often. But if one of them is like 99.99% of its length, that means that it has to wait 1,000 to 10,000, however many long waveforms to like sync back up with the other guy. So detuning, and again, this is applicable to a lot of different types of synthesis. Just a little bit will give you a bit of a chorusing, almost like a phasing effect. So we're going to do that. That's a nice little trick. Let's also pop on, while we're talking about it, vibrato and unison, which are, again, baked right into the synth, guys. It was there the whole time, I'm saying. So I'll get off my high horse here. We're going to grab our amplitude envelopes, and I'm just going to pull these up. We're not really making a plucky noise, so let's just go ahead and make those sound cool. And maybe this second envelope. You know what? I don't really want a envelope on the second filter. Maybe at all. It doesn't make too much sense for this noise. That sounds pretty cool. I'm pretty into it. We could even... that's a little bit too. I wanted to see what sub would do, but that's just going to add it in the super low region, which we really don't need. There's also glide if I want to kind of bounce between a couple of notes. And if I do want to do this, you know, I want to be sure to set my voices to mono. But honestly, I often don't use glide because I'm a little bit more of a static producer. So this is a cool little analog patch. Could push it a little bit more random, but we've got a nice kind of divide between randomness and practicality. I'm going to pull the filter 2, the Formant filter, down a little bit more. It's not bad. So now if we just treat this thing a little bit, a little phaser over here, we'll send it to a bit. Oh, it's already got some reverb on it. And let's go ahead and grab a little, what I'm just going to call it the cheaters compression. We're just going to grab a limiter and maximizer for this down. It's actually pretty nice. Let's put a little bit of white noise on top of here. Oh, wait, you know what? There's noise built into the analog. I almost forgot. Look at that. And we can send this to either filter. Let's go ahead and send it to filter 2. Let's color it upwards. Just hear a little bit in the background right there. So that's super nice. And let's go ahead and beef it up with like a little saturator. And pull this maybe after the phaser. Let's go ahead, and I would love to hear some chords on this guy as well. Let's go ahead and pop the voices back over to 8. I think we're gonna have to come up a little bit. Check it if you want just the weird sound design part, just turn off amp 1. Let's go here. Oh, that's cool. Right? If you want it to be more practical, turn off amp 2 and leave on amp 1. So you have 2 sides here, right? And that's just the kind of a really basic patch for analog. We're just using it. I'd say like we're half breaking it with the Formant, and then we're half just using a very practical patch here. But I wanted to do this video just to showcase like, hey, it's not unusable. I use analog in every single project. In fact, one kind of thought process I'm usually going through in my projects is to use one of everything. If you're finding yourself like you're leaning on the same instrument time and time again, most people tend to pigeonhole their noise. That's generally not what we want to do as producers, right? Most producers want, like, oh, I want my sound to feel cutting edge and cool and new and fresh. Well, if you're using the same synth every single time, how is it going to feel fresh from the last 8 songs, right? I fell into this trap a long time ago when I learned operator, and I just kept using operator in kind of the same way. Where now, if you empower yourself with the tools of sound design, then you just know enough about every single synthesizer to make something cool from scratch every single time. And that is really how you're going to get a lot of cool sound out of your DAW. And, this is a really practical synth, but if you really want to lean into it, we could just go to sync mode a little bit harder here, grab another LFO. We could do 2 formants. We could pop it down to the lowest octave possible and resample it and try to find some grains. It could get really goopy really fast. So don't sleep on analog, and just learn it if for any reason to understand the basics of signal flow. So that's it from me for Slam Academy. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for the next one. Peace.